The woman who got into my car at sunset. Said, "Drive me somewhere secure." The passenger door opened before the dashboard clock finished humming through 6:14. I was parked at the curb outside the Langford Building, engine idling, both hands still on the wheel, trying to make my shoulders remember how to unclench after a 12-hour corporate standoff that had ended quietly enough not to become news. The clock on my dashboard made a low digital sound every minute, a cheap electronic pulse I had never noticed before that evening. Then Elena Parker slid into my sedan with a leather portfolio clenched in both hands and said, "Drive," like the wrong answer could cost her a company. I did not touch the gear shift. The city outside was turning gold at the edges. Traffic smeared itself across the windshield. A cyclist shouted at a taxi. Somewhere down the block, a bus sighed at the curb. Inside my car, Elena sat rigid in the passenger seat, the door still half open behind her, one heel braced against the floor mat as if she might need to run again. She wore a modest white blouse buttoned high under a closed beige blazer, the kind of executive uniform chosen for boardrooms and hostile elevators, not for climbing into strangers' cars at dusk. Her dark trousers were immaculate. Her long brown hair had loosened around her face from whatever speed had brought her to my curb. Nothing about her looked chaotic except her hands. The leather portfolio creaked under her grip. "Ms. Parker?" I said, because I recognized her from 3 merger briefings and 2 hostile acquisition files. "Before I move this vehicle, I need to know whether you are in immediate physical danger or trying to outrun leverage." Her eyes moved from my hands to the gear shift, then to the locks. I left the locks untouched. I kept the engine running, the car in park, and my palms visible on the steering wheel. "My name is Elena Parker," she said, too controlled to be calm. "I know who you are, Nathan Reed. I know what you do, and I know what your firm charges. I will double your retainer if you drive right now." The clock hummed again. I had built a career out of rooms where nobody could admit they were afraid. Blackmail, extortion, quiet corporate terrorism wrapped in clean language. Most people thought crisis negotiation meant talking people down from ledges. In my world, the ledge was usually a clause buried on page 46 of an executive contract. "I do not drive blind," I said, "and I do not accept retainers from a locked jaw and a trembling portfolio. Tell me what's inside it." For 1 second, her face hardened, not with anger, but calculation. She had walked into my car because she needed a tool. She was now deciding whether the tool had too many terms. The portfolio creaked once more. "There is a moral turpitude clause in my executive contract," she said. "If it is triggered, I am removed from the board. The merger I have spent 3 years building collapses before Friday's vote. My firm loses 2 national contracts, and my name becomes the scandal everyone uses to bury the acquisition." "Who is triggering it?" "Marcus Vance," she said. I had heard the name, rival board member, smooth in front of cameras, sharp in private, the sort of man who never put a threat in an email if a lunch invitation would do. "Method?" Elena opened the portfolio just enough for me to see a printed transcript clipped to a secure message header. Her thumb pinned the corner so hard the paper bowed. 30 minutes ago, he sent me an audio file, a voicemail of me supposedly offering a back-channel bribe to a federal regulator. It is stitched together from conference calls, clean enough to sound like my cadence if you do not know how I speak when I am tired. "Did you make the call?" "No." The answer came without tremor. Good. Panic had not eaten the truth. "He gave me 48 hours to resign quietly." She continued. "If I don't, he releases it to the press and requests an internal audit. An audit halts the merger vote. Even if I am cleared in 6 months, the deal dies in 48 hours. I glanced at the clock. 6:15 now. The hum sounded smaller than the problem and somehow more cruel for it. "Put your seatbelt on," I said. Her chin tilted. "Now you drive?" "Now I have a threat assessment." She clicked the belt into place. I checked my mirrors, pulled into traffic, and merged into the evening lane without giving the city any more drama to feed on. For 3 blocks we did not speak. I let silence do its work. Most people made mistakes because they tried to outrun the first wave of fear. They filled rooms with plans too early. They apologized before anyone had accused them. They surrendered before a demand became specific. My mentor, the first negotiator who ever taught me how to sit still inside someone else's emergency, had said the same thing until it became a groove in my mind. You don't fight the panic. You build a fence around it. A fence was not a prison. It was a boundary. It gave fear somewhere to stop. At the next red light, I reached for the passenger climate controls without looking at her and turned the seat heater to low. I'm not cold, Elena said immediately. Adrenaline crash, I replied. Your body drops heat when it starts leaving survival mode. Let the seat do its job. You can argue with me after your hands stop shaking. She looked offended for almost 4 seconds. Then the heater warmed beneath her, and her fingers slowly unclenched around the portfolio. You always talk like that? Like what? Like you were filing someone's panic in alphabetical order. I kept my eyes on the road, only when the panic brings documentation. A sound almost escaped her, not quite a laugh, but close enough to matter. My office occupied the 4th floor of an unmarked concrete building 2 blocks from the courthouse. There was no sign on the door. People who needed my firm already knew how to find us, and people who did not need us were happier staying unaware. The lobby lights were off when we arrived. I walked Elena through the keypad, biometric scan, and deadbolt corridor, narrating each step before it happened so nothing felt like a trap. Keypad first. My right hand goes to the scanner. Second door opens inward. You stay behind me only until I clear the hall. After that, you choose where you stand. She noticed the phrasing. Her eyes flicked to me once, quick and measuring. Inside, the office was spare by design. A long oak table, a kitchenette, a glass wall for timeline mapping, 2 terminals mounted to an evidence island, and a server closet that hummed behind frosted panels. I had slept there often enough to know which chair made the least sound and which bulb above the table flickered when the air conditioning kicked too hard. Elena went straight to the table and placed the portfolio down with both hands. I brought hard copies of Marcus's board access logs. She said, I can pull corporate server data if you give me a secure terminal. We need to prove he accessed the source audio. Stop, I said. Her face sharpened. We do not have time to stop. We do not have time to run in the wrong direction. I moved to the kitchenette, took a mug from the cabinet, and poured black coffee. Her blazer carried the faint, bitter trace of dark roast from wherever she had spent the afternoon. I set 1 sugar packet beside the mug and pushed both toward her across the table. Drink that. Then we defined the fence. She looked at the coffee, then at the sugar packet. The fence. Rules of engagement. She did not sit until I did. I placed my phone face down near the center of the table, then pushed it 3 inches away from myself. The gesture was small, almost pointless, but in my work, small visible boundaries mattered. Rule 1, I said, you do not lie to me, including by omission. Rule 2, I handle leverage structure and threat behavior. You handle corporate optics and internal realities. Rule 3, I do not act on your behalf without explicit consent unless there is immediate physical danger. Rule 4, you do not contact Marcus alone while we are in active containment. Are those terms acceptable? She studied me over the rim of the coffee. You take this seriously. The moment I take the contract, your problem becomes my problem, I said. I do not lose my problems. For the first time since she entered my car, her mouth softened. That sounds exhausting. It is why my plants are fake. She looked toward the single plastic fern on the filing cabinet. It leaned at a hopeless angle because my analyst had once used it to hide a microphone during training. Elena's eyes narrowed. That is the saddest office plant I have ever seen. It has survived 3 extortion cases and 1 intern. This time, she did laugh. It was brief and dry, but it changed the air in the room. The crisis remained. The deadline remained. Marcus remained. But a human sound had entered the war room, and that meant panic had not taken every inch. She took the chair across from me. Acceptable, she said. Before I let the first file touch my terminal, I opened a fresh evidence packet and placed it between us. Chain of custody. I said, you authorize what we handle. You keep the originals. I work from verified copies. If this ends up in front of counsel, nobody gets to say I manufactured a miracle in a locked room. Elena read the authorization form line by line. I did not rush her. The plastic fern on the cabinet shivered when the air system clicked on, and she glanced at it. Your plant is afraid of your paperwork. Most people are. She signed. Only then did I call Mira Solis, my forensic analyst. On speaker, Mira confirmed Elena's consent, warned us not to touch the originals, and requested the copied files. Is everyone in your office like this? Elena asked after the call ended. No, Mira is the friendly one. For the first time, Elena sat back in her chair without gripping the portfolio. Good. I uncapped a dry erase marker and faced the glass wall. Walk me through the first message. For the next 4 hours, the office became less a room than a machine built out of exhaustion, coffee, and evidence. Elena worked like someone who had been underestimated exactly once and never allowed it again. She sorted printed logs into columns with frightening precision, cross-referencing boardroom schedules, server timestamps, meeting minutes, and travel calendars. I ran the audio through linguistic and acoustic analysis, isolating cadence breaks and background noise behind the fabricated voicemail. The dashboard clock's hum had followed us in my head. I replaced it with the server closet's low vibration and the scratch of marker against glass. Listen here, I said, replaying a 3-second fragment under your voice, that rattle. She leaned toward the terminal, not toward me, one hand braced on the edge of the table. HVAC. Boardroom? B, she said without hesitation. Boardroom B had the old unit. It made that sound whenever the compressor cycled. I marked it on the glass. When was the unit replaced? Her fingers flew over the access file. Ink had smudged along her wrist, and she still found the work order before the software finished rendering the waveform. 5 weeks ago. Then the source audio is at least 5 weeks old, I said. Not a live voicemail from yesterday. Foundational crack. Not enough, she said, already moving to another log. The board will not care about an air conditioner if the press is screaming bribery. No, I agreed, but Marcus will care if the file construction ties back to him. At 12:42, she discovered that Boardroom B's access console had been used after hours on a night Marcus had claimed to be in Delaware. At 1:18, I found a splice pattern where a syllable from her quarterly forecast call had been joined to a regulator's name from a compliance training session. At 2:06, Elena wrote 3 words on the glass wall so hard the marker squeaked. Marcus needs speed. I circled them. Exactly. I said, if he had clean evidence, he would have filed it. He gave you 48 hours because time is his weapon. Elena stood with the marker cap between her teeth for half a second before realizing it. She removed it, stared at the cap like it had betrayed her, and set it carefully on the table. Do not mention that. The cap? I have negotiated trucking contracts with men who would rather swallow gravel than accept a correction. I will not be undone by chewing office supplies. Your secret is safe. It had better be. Warmth did not arrive in grand gestures. It arrived in the way she finally drank the coffee before it went cold. In the way I stopped correcting her when she paced, because pacing helped her think. In the way she started handing me documents before I asked, because she had learned the shape of my questions. By 3:30, the glass wall held a timeline. By 4:10, the timeline had begun to look like a trap. At 5:06, Mira's first report came back with 6 flagged edits and 1 sentence in the notes that made Elena go still. Source structure suggests the speaker was assembled from at least 19 separate recordings. 19. Elena read the line twice. The mug in her hand stopped halfway to her mouth. He has been collecting pieces of my voice for months, she said. I did not soften the truth, yes. The word landed harder because I did not wrap it in comfort. Outside the windows, a delivery truck backed into the alley with 3 dull warning beeps. Elena flinched at the third one, then set the mug down with care. Every board call, she said, every strategy session, every time I thought I was being careful with language, he was building a weapon from the pauses. Then we make the weapon visible. She looked at the glass wall, where my marker lines had turned her last 3 years into arrows and dates. Visible enough? Visible enough that counsel can point to it without needing poetry. That is a depressing standard. It wins rooms. She picked up the marker again. This time, her hand did not shake. She drew a square around Marcus's after-hours access window and wrote beside it, "Why Boardroom B?" I liked that about her. She did not ask why this was happening to her for long. She asked where the mechanism was. A crisis negotiator learns to respect that instinct. Panic looks for exits, discipline looks for hinges. Then her phone vibrated on the oak table. The sound was sharp enough to make both of us still. Elena looked at the screen. Her face did not collapse all at once. It emptied in stages. First her mouth lost its line, then the color left her cheeks. Then her hand moved toward the phone and stopped just short of touching it. "What did he send?" I asked. She turned the screen toward me. "A new secure message, a second audio file, a transcript header with Sarah Parker's name across the top." "My sister," Elena said. "Sarah is CFO of the regional subsidiary." I read the first lines. The file purported to capture Sarah authorizing a shadow account. It was better than the first fabrication. Cleaner, built out of shorter source material. "If he releases this," Elena said. Each word scraped flat. "Sarah is not just suspended. She is investigated. Federal prison becomes a headline before anyone checks the splice." The case changed shape in my hands. Blackmail against Elena was leverage. A fabricated criminal record against her sister was a second fence built around a person who had not even entered the room. Elena reached for the phone. I placed my hand on the table beside it, not over hers. Close enough to interrupt the motion, far enough to leave her choice intact. "Before you call him," I said, "give me 10 seconds to tell you what happens if you concede." Her eyes snapped to mine. "Nathan, he changed the rules. He escalated because the first lever was not working fast enough. A blackmailer does not retire leverage because you pay the first ransom. If you resign now, he owns your resignation, your silence, and Sarah's fear." Her fingers curled against the tabletop. 10 seconds, I said again. "Then the phone is yours." The server hum filled the room. She pulled her hand back. "Talk." I did not waste a word. "We treat Sarah's file as proof of pattern. Marcus is not exposing misconduct. He is manufacturing control. That turns the board's risk calculus against him if we document source, intent, and chain of custody. You do not call him to surrender. You call a meeting where he believes you will. And if he releases it before then we are ready with a verified counter package, but I do not think he will release before extracting your resignation. His value is in control, not chaos." Elena looked down at the phone. Her thumb hovered over the screen. "Do you want me to handle the next contact?" I asked. "Or do you want to set the meeting yourself?" Her breath caught once. Then she picked up the phone and typed with both hands. "I said it," she said. "He thinks I'm isolated. Let him keep thinking that." By sunrise, the city outside the office windows had turned the color of wet concrete. I had not slept. Elena had not either. The timeline on the glass wall had grown into an evidence map, audio artifacts, HVAC history, access badge logs, spoofed relay routes, Delaware shell registry, board calendar conflicts, and a draft retraction agreement designed to make future release of altered files cost Marcus the one thing he cared about most: voting control. We stepped onto the sidewalk at 7:12. The air was cold enough to wake the nerves in my face. I held my car keys but did not move toward the sedan yet. "You need 2 hours to reset before we go to headquarters," I said. "I can take you home, or we can use the secure conference suite downstairs. Your choice." Elena stared at the city traffic moving past us. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but the frantic edge had burned into something harder. "No," she said. The word landed clean. She walked to the passenger door of my sedan and opened it. Then she looked back at me over the roof. "We're going somewhere secure," she said, "and you can't hide behind procedure this time." I stayed still. The keys cut into my palm. Define secure. A room with a closed line, no staff traffic, and no one from my company tracking the visitor log before noon. The office downstairs meets two of those three. Your private records room? It is at my apartment, I said. Separate entrance, separate line, no personal areas involved. I do not take clients there unless they choose it with full information. You can say no. I can also rent a law firm room, but it will put 2 more names on a calendar and cost us 40 minutes. Elena held my gaze across the roof of the car. I am choosing the records room, not your apartment, not you. The room. A boundary stated that clearly deserved respect. Then we use the room, I said. The drive took 10 minutes. The dashboard clock hummed through every red light. My building was old brick, wedged between a print shop and a closed tailor. The records room had a separate side door, a desk, a secure hardline, a locked cabinet, and a window that faced a blank wall. I unlocked it, stepped inside first, turned on the overhead light, and stood aside before she crossed the threshold. Door stays open or closed? I asked. Closed, she said, but unlocked. Done. She set her laptop on the desk and opened the contract draft. I stayed on the opposite side of the table. The room smelled faintly of printer toner and old paper, a better scent for war than coffee. At some point, I made eggs and toast in the kitchenette attached to the office suite and brought the plate to the desk, setting it beside her elbow without comment. She reached for the toast while still typing, missed it once, then found it. Crumbs fell onto the draft retraction agreement. You have compromised the document, I said. She looked at the crumbs, then at me. Add a food contamination clause. Marcus would sign anything to avoid your toast debris. She ate half the toast without smiling. Then, when she thought I had turned away, the corner of her mouth lifted. The retraction agreement had to do 4 things: preserve the merger timeline, protect Sarah from the fabricated shadow account file, bind Marcus to a sworn admission that the audio had been altered, and attach consequences strong enough that his lawyers would advise him to sign rather than test us. Elena built the corporate language. I built the leverage architecture. If we demand all his shares, it looks punitive, she said, tapping the screen. The board may resist enforcing it. Then make it conditional, I said. Any future release by him, his staff, any proxy, or any anonymous source traceable to his server triggers immediate escrow transfer of his voting shares pending arbitration. It is not punishment. It is containment. You sound like you build cages. Fences, I corrected. She glanced up. A fence lets people choose which side they stand on, I said. The room went quiet except for the hardline's soft buzz. By 11:20, we had a final packet, forensic audio summary, HVAC work order, timestamp matrix, Delaware shell registry extract, spoofed relay path, Sarah file comparison, NDA, retraction, and conditional voting share escrow trigger. Every page had a tab. Elena labeled the tabs herself because she did not trust my handwriting. Your G looks like a collapsed crane, she said. My handwriting has de-escalated several rooms through confusion alone. That is not a professional strategy. It is a secondary benefit. She shook her head once, but she did not give the pen back. At 11:42, we stood outside Boardroom A on the 40th floor of her corporate headquarters. Her sister arrived at headquarters before we reached the boardroom. Sarah Parker waited near the private elevators with her coat still buttoned wrong and a binder pressed against her ribs. She was younger than Elena by 4 years, with the same steady eyes and a very different way of holding fear. Elena made herself sharper when threatened. Sarah became careful, almost quiet, as if noise might make the accusation true. I brought the subsidiary account ledgers. Sarah said, every transfer approval, every board authorization, every vendor reconciliation from the quarter he used. Elena took the binder. For 1 second, the sisters stood facing each other without speaking. Then Elena adjusted the crooked collar of Sarah's coat, a small domestic gesture so ordinary it cut through the corporate glass around us. You did not authorize a shadow account, Elena said. Sarah swallowed. No. Then we are not letting him make you sound like someone who did. Sarah nodded once. The binder shifted from her arms to Elena's, and with it, the center of the fight moved exactly where it belonged. I stepped back and called board counsel from the hallway phone, not my mobile, keeping the record clean. I told him there was evidence of attempted extortion involving 2 executives, that we had forensic materials ready for review, and that Elena Parker was requesting an emergency closed session before any audit motion could be introduced. I did not describe the evidence. I did not threaten. I gave him enough structure to understand that ignoring us would create more liability than hearing us. When I hung up, Elena was watching me. "You never sound like you were asking," she said. "I'm asking. I just put walls around the answer. There is that fence again. It keeps showing up where people keep trying to run through traffic." Sarah looked between us. "Is this how the 2 of you have been talking for 24 hours? "Unfortunately," Elena said. "Efficiently," I corrected. Sarah's mouth twitched, and the hallway felt slightly less like a courthouse. The corridor was all glass and polished stone. People passed with tablets tucked against their ribs, trying not to stare. Elena's company had already begun to feel the tremor. Rumors moved faster than memos. 2 legal assistants stopped speaking when they saw her. A board secretary looked at me, then looked away too quickly. Elena stood in front of the mahogany doors with the leather portfolio tucked under one arm. I held the evidence folder. "Elena." She looked back. "I can walk in, lay out the framework, and dismantle his position," I said. "Or you can take the folder and do it yourself. Do you want me to close this, or do you want to?" For 1 second, her thumbnail pressed into her index finger. Then she released it. "Give me the folder, Nathan." I handed it over and stepped back. She pushed open the doors. Marcus Vance sat at the head of the conference table in a charcoal suit, silver hair immaculate, hands folded in the calm posture of a man expecting surrender. 7 board members were present. Legal counsel sat along the wall. Sarah Parker stood near the windows, pale but upright, one hand gripping a folder of her own. Elena saw her sister. Something changed in her shoulders. Not softness, not fear, alignment. Marcus smiled. "Elena," he said, "I was not expecting you to bring a consultant to your resignation." "I'm not resigning." Her voice cut through the room with no need for volume. She walked to the center of the table and set the folder down. The sound of it hitting polished wood made one board member flinch. "Page 1 is an independent acoustic analysis," Elena said. "It identifies the background HVAC rattle in the fabricated voicemail you sent me. That rattle belongs to boardroom B before last month's renovation, which proves the source audio predates the call you claim I made yesterday." Marcus leaned back. "Technical noise. The press will not care." "Page 2 is the renovation work order. Page 3 is the badge log showing your after-hours access to boardroom B on the night the source file was created. Page 4 is the splice map showing my quarterly forecast call joined to a compliance training recording." Board counsel reached for the folder first. Good counsel always moved toward documents before drama. Marcus's smile thinned. "You cannot prove chain of custody?" "Page 5, Elena said. She did not look at me. She did not need to. "The spoofed relay you used to send the extortion threat routes through a private server registered to Warden Bridge LLC. Page 6 is the Delaware Registry extract. Page 7 shows your signature on Warden Bridge's formation document. Page 8 compares the second fabricated file involving my sister to the same source architecture." Sarah lowered her gaze to the table for half a second, then lifted it again. Elena placed the final document in front of Marcus. "You have 2 choices. Sign the retraction agreement and the non-disclosure. It states that you fabricated the audio, withdraws any request for audit, and places your voting shares in conditional escrow if any altered file is released by you, your staff, your proxy, or any source traceable to your server, or refuse, and counsel forwards the logs to federal investigators before lunch." Marcus stared at the packet. His knuckles whitened around his pen. "You are bluffing." I spoke for the first time. "No," I said, "we documented." The room went still. Marcus looked from me to Elena, and I watched the exact moment he understood the fence. Not a threat, not panic, a perimeter. Every exit he thought he had owned was now measured, labeled, and closed by his own data. He signed. The scratch of his gold pen across the retraction agreement was almost delicate. He shoved the document away. This isn't over. Elena picked up the signed agreement, slid it into the leather portfolio, and turned her back on him. It is, she said. You just signed the boundary. We walked out together in the elevator. Sarah reached for Elena's hand. Elena took it. Neither of them spoke. The numbers dropped from 40 to 1 in a clean, descending line. After we left headquarters, there were still calls to make. A blackmail threat did not dissolve just because the villain signed a document with a shaking hand. Counsel needed the sealed archive. HR needed a controlled statement. Sarah needed written confirmation that no audit request would be opened under her name. So we sat in the parked sedan, the clock humming between every call. Elena spoke to counsel first. She kept the USB drive on the console and one hand wrapped around a bottle of water I had taken from the office fridge. No, she said into the phone. Use the word fabricated, not disputed, not unclear. Fabricated. The next call was Sarah, Elena asked before putting it on speaker. Sarah laughed once through tears when Elena ordered her to go home, eat something with salt, and send proof that the dog had not taken over the apartment. When the calls were done, Elena set the phone down and pressed both palms against her eyes for 3 seconds. Then she straightened again. Now it's over, she said. The fence is holding, I answered. That seemed to satisfy both of us. The dashboard clock was humming again by the time Elena and I sat in my parked sedan outside headquarters. The afternoon sun reflected off the windshield hard enough to make the city look overexposed. I reached into my inner jacket pocket and pulled out the encrypted USB drive containing the verified evidence copies. This is not the only copy, I said before handing it to her. Your counsel has the sealed archive. Sarah has her own packet. This one is yours. She took it, looked at the tiny black rectangle in her palm, and placed it on the center console between us. For a long moment, she did nothing else. Then her shoulders dropped all at once. It's over, she said. The immediate threat is over, I corrected gently. The aftermath will still need structure. Her mouth curved faintly. You cannot help yourself. No? She turned toward me. The armor she had worn since 6/14 the night before was not gone. I did not believe people survived by losing their armor. It had simply opened enough for air to pass through. Thank you, she said. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to reach across the console, to cover her hand now that the danger had passed. The instinct was not professional, and that was exactly why I did not follow it. She had hired me inside a crisis. My job was not to turn relief into pressure. You did the work. I said, I just built the fence. She looked at the USB drive between us, then back at me. And if I want to speak to you when you are no longer working for me? The clock hummed. Then you wait until the case is fully transferred to counsel. I said, then you call me without a crisis attached. Her smile arrived slowly, tired, real. You are the most inconveniently ethical man I have ever met. My plants say otherwise. Your plants are plastic. They are also loyal. She laughed, and this time there was no fracture underneath it. 6 months later, winter wind pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the banquet hall while Elena Parker stood beneath 300 lights and closed the merger speech that Marcus Vance had tried to prevent. The merger had passed. Sarah had been cleared before an accusation ever reached the press. Marcus had resigned 2 weeks after the vote, citing health and family priorities in a statement so smooth that every person in the room knew it had been written by someone expensive. I stood near the back of the banquet hall. In a tuxedo, I tolerated the way one tolerates dental equipment. In my hand was sparkling water. In my pocket was a small card Elena had mailed to my office after the legal transfer closed. No message, just a sketch of a fence around a ridiculous plastic fern. On stage, Elena thanked her operations team, her legal team, and her sister. She did not mention me. That was how it should have been. Then she stepped down from the podium and walked past the board members trying to intercept her. Her eyes found me near the back wall. The old reflex in me looked for exits, lines of sight, threat angles. The newer part of me watched her cross a public room with nothing urgent in her hands. She stopped in front of me, 1 foot away. "You're hiding," she said, observing. Behind a fern, I glanced at the enormous decorative plant beside me. This one is real. I do not know how to negotiate with it. She took the glass of water I had brought for her before she asked. Her fingers touched mine over the rim, brief and deliberate. "The board wants to meet the man who consults on all my major structural decisions," she said. "I prefer the background." "I know." She looked toward the stage, then back at me. Her voice softened without losing its command. "The case is closed. Counsel has everything. There is no crisis attached." The words moved through me more slowly than any threat assessment. The room was public. Her choice was visible. No deadline stood behind it. No blackmailer held a clock over her head. She slid her arm through mine, not to anchor herself from fear, but to bring me with her by choice. "Tonight," she said, "we're going somewhere public, and you can't say no." The hum of the banquet hall lights reminded me, absurdly, of the dashboard clock at 6:14. The same sound, a different room, a different kind of pressure. You don't fight the panic, you build a fence around it. But once the danger passes, love is the person who still asks before opening the gate. I looked at Elena, then at the room waiting for her, and let her lead. The end.